There was a very important piece that was spoken, it came up in the St. Petersburg Forum. It was a speech by someone called Andrei Brezhnikov, a former SVR, that's a KGB officer, former head of it, very serious senior person. And he said that as a consequence of what's happened in Iran and generally with the United States, he said Russia has entered into a new prolonged global confrontation with the West. According to him, this represents a fundamental shift in the nature of warfare and will define Russian policy and society for the foreseeable future. He said this may last 20 to 30 years. Instead, it is a war of attrition focused on undermining critical systems, including infrastructure, command networks, technology, space assets, biological and information domain. He said the West views Russia as an existential threat, and it is deliberately avoiding nuclear confrontation in favor of a strategy of gradual escalation. And then he used the analogy I used with you a little time ago. He says Europe is trying to boil the Russian frog in the water, slowly turning up the heat until it expires. So this is going to be a new economy, a new world. I mean, the center of this is self-protection. How are all these states, Russia, China, going to protect themselves against the policy being pursued at the moment by the United States? How are they going to protect themselves? Well, the answer is they have to make themselves less dependent on things that they cannot control. Maybe some will have oil and energy possibilities, but food, fertilizer, all of these other aspects of modern life, they're going to have to find alternatives, or they are going to have to make themselves much more self-sufficient. I think we are going to see a huge shift, not just by Russia, but by the whole world, to a different economy, away from, if you like, a globalized economy towards a much more defensive, as this SVR officer says, a defensive economy, defensive posture, so that it can manage sanctions, tariffs, and economic warfare from the United States intended, and also to get out of the dangers of the dollar, to find ways of managing finance that do not involve the use of the dollar.
So if that's kind of the way that, because if we're looking at Russia and Iran as two cogs in this bigger machine, they both seem to be thinking long term. You talked about Russia, maybe 20 years. It's clear that if Iran is going down the path of that strategy you read off the screen a few minutes ago, that implies years, plural, as well, an unknown period, but that their mentality is looking long term. President Trump is angry and he can't figure out something that's in the next few weeks. He's going to be ready to take some action here because we have no patience. We don't think anything through on the long term. So let me ask you about one of the other pretty big cogs in the international machine, and that is China. Do you see them playing a similar role as what Iran and Russia are?
Precisely. And they're doing that. They're doing it using different tools, that's all. They're using rare earths, they're using technology. And, you know, this is part of this bigger war, because the United States is quite clear. They call it, the Pax Silicana, that they want to have a monopoly on data centers and on control of, if you like, technology and intrusive AI into people to be able to control security. But the problem has been, I mean, two problems for the United States with the AI is one, that they don't have the electric power, and secondly, it's not profitable. There's a great problem of profitability. So they're desperate to get new resources in, which is, I imagine, why Trump has suggested that the US might take an investment in these AI firms, i.e. pump in government money. to sort of socialize them. But the main point I'm making here, which affects Iran, is, of course, what they've done to resolve the problem of no energy in the US and too expensive energy. Energy in China costs 1/6 of the price it does in the United States. So they've moved their data centers to the Gulf states, to UAE, to Bahrain. Huge data centers are being moved there because there's cheap energy supplies available there. And Iran and other states see this as, this is going to be that what is being proposed is, this is, if you like, the Gulf becoming an economic protectorate of the United States in AI, dominating their AI on behalf of the United States, but using it against Iran and against Russia and China. And that's why Iran is saying too, listen, if you want to coexist in the Gulf with Iran, get rid of those data centers. What do you need, to spend 30 billion on data centers? This is just a part of this structure that the United States is building, where they hope that everyone will have to come to Silicon for their AI, for their computing needs and everything. America may not have the petrodollar any longer, but it would have the AI, the rent and income as a monopoly. And that will secure the future prosperity of the United States. Well, the question of whether this is going to work or not is a different one. But the principle for Iran and China and Russia is, the United States can't simply, move, if you like, that structure of control and monopoly to the Gulf alongside Iran, because it's inimical to Iran, and Iran sees it as inimical. And they're saying, you have to join the Asian economic structures. You have to be part of Asia if you're going to survive in the Gulf. You can't just be a part of Silicon Valley sitting next door to us and using your data centers to target us and to target anything that you believe is a threat to Israel sitting in the Gulf.
So let me ask you then, let's just for continuity's sake here, for simplicity, let's say this is a 20-year long conflict that these folks are mentally preparing to wage. So it's not just about what happens in the next one day or even in the next month or so, but they're looking long term, almost no matter how these things shake out here in the near term here. Can the United States win this long game? Or maybe even a better question, can we compete with this if our mentality is on what the next election cycle is going to be? We never look more than 2 years into the future. What is your assessment?
Well, I mean, I think, we are in a new war. I mean, it's a war of really, deep civilizational visions. For Iran, as I said, it is about, they are willing to sacrifice for their autonomy, for their sovereignty, to choose their own destiny. So is Russia, and so is China. China, in its own way, is doing this. So there is both a short horizon and there is a long horizon. The long horizon was, as that Russian former SVR official described it very clearly in his speech, a really interesting speech in which he's talking about, that there has to be deterrence, there has to be fear in the West of Russia. So we have to build up deterrence, we have to prepare for a long war, but at the same time, the short war. Well, what's going to be the short war? What's going to change? Trump is in a trap. Israel is in a trap. Israel is in just as much a trap, and in fact, as the United States, as Trump is on the issue with Iran. I can explain it, but that's what the reality is. So how is this going to end up? Well, I think it just ends up, probably won't take 10 years or even 10 months. I think it will probably begin to end as Europe falls off the economic cliff, which could happen anytime quite soon. It runs out of fuel for its aircraft. It runs out of diesel to supply shops in the area. Petrol has to be rationed. All these things come into practice. That'll probably be then the end of this chapter, because probably at that stage the United States will come to the conclusion, look, the best thing to do is to call this whole thing quits, get out, and let things stay as they are.
Well, let's take a look at a couple of those headwinds, because you've written a couple of things on your conflicts forum, which I think tail right into what you're talking about here. Some of these things here I think are going to be new to our audience because they're not in the mainstream media. They're not even being talked about here. But there's some pretty big headwinds even inside Israel itself. I want to look at two things, because you published a couple of things recently. One, on what's happening with Netanyahu himself, and then secondly, in the political order in Iran, Israel, which could discombobulate what the Israeli military plans are as well. So I'd like you to speak to those two things. Let's look first at the Netanyahu part. You write in this one, Netanyahu failed to reignite the war. At least this is up to this point. A new and dangerous strategic equation now limits Israeli power. And in this, you post this here by this Ben Casbit person, says, in appearance yesterday in front of a camera, Netanyahu looked like a deflated balloon. And then when you read into it a little bit further, from a situation where Israel operated freely in southern Lebanon and bombed Dihaya, that's in Beirut, whenever necessary, we have become hostages to the Iranians. Israel cannot stand further rounds of war with Iran. So let's see if Trump gets his way, what that would mean. The economy will not stand it, he says. The public will not stand it. The security establishment will have a hard time standing it. And all of this is true for the Trump era. Netanyahu did not want to end this war. He wanted to reach the end of his term. He succeeded. This is an absolute victory, which is a terrible strategic loss for the country. What does he mean by that?
He means this. If you look at this in the big picture, not just about Lebanon, but Israel has pursued this policy throughout the Middle East since October the 7th of war without negotiations, without politics, simply a war to secure territory and to establish a greater Israel, and to remove and expel and exterminate any potential enemies. The Israelis call this project a permanent war to the root. The root tells you all what that means. That's what we're seeing in Gaza. That's what we've been seeing in southern Lebanon. And what is coming out from people and senior military political leaders are saying, we failed. Israel has failed. It hasn't, it thought that Iran would have collapsed. It believed there was going to be an uprising that would take over the state and it would collapse. In fact, and this is what Israelis are saying, Iran has emerged stronger during this war, and more resilient and more united. And what's happened? We are stuck in quagmires in Lebanon. We can't win it. We haven't got a strategy in Lebanon. We can't win in Gaza. It's getting worse. Hezbollah, Hamas is getting stronger there. Across the region, this policy of absolute military victory, we haven't the troops. We would need another 6 or 7 times the IDF that we have now. We'd need 6 or 7 more IDFs to manage the requirements on us. We are trapped in this, and we have to rethink this project, Mr. Netanyahu. It hasn't worked, this extreme military aggression to achieve dominance and hegemony for Israel across the region. We've succeeded nowhere with it, and it's imposing huge costs. And as Ben Caspit put it in that thing, the people are not with us anymore. They can see that it's been a defeat. They were told that Iran would collapse like a pack of cards, and then it would all be divided up, and it would be over, and Israel would emerge as the undisputed hegemony of the region. In fact, they're fighting still on every front and not winning. So this is a big question. How do you address it? Well, one of the answers is to go back to the old Ben-Gurion equation, which is that Israel is a small country within small boundaries, small population, small economy, small army. We have to stay within our limits, within our borders. We can't afford to control. We don't have the means to control the whole region by force of arms militarily. We are a reservist army. We are a Clausewitzian army that believes that war is just an extension of politics. And so, the debate is going on. And really what is being posed here is, was this whole strategy a mistake? Do we need to rethink the whole idea of Zionism, of special rights for one population group over territory shared with other populations? Do we have to rethink the structures? So this is a real existential crisis has commenced. It hasn't come to culmination. It hasn't produced it. But if you look at the polls, Netanyahu, for the first time, I've always been the person saying, look, don't think that Netanyahu is just going to be removed and replaced. He's a survivor. I've seen it. I've known it for a long time. He just he slips through. He's like a slippery snake. He gets on and he stays in power. But this time, it really looks a crisis. I'm not sure that he will survive this. The polls show that he won't survive it. The court case suggests he won't survive the court case. And there's still no pardon that has been given to him by the president. So it's a real crisis. So that's the crisis there. And the crisis in Washington is different. Trump is trapped. If he goes on with the war, it's going to damage him politically. If he extends it and escalates the war, his polls, which are already in the doldrums, are only going to get worse. The economy, everyone says this month, during June or by July, we're going to start seeing the effects of energy shortages across it. We're going to see supply lines being broken. Helium is not there. Fertilizers are not available. The economies are beginning to feel these, if you like, fractures. People's ability to pay for things because the money that was generated from the traffic in oil is no longer available for other things. So I think it's a very serious situation in Israel at the moment.
And in fact, I want to go, you mentioned about Netanyahu's survivability and his remarkable ability, no matter what you think of him personally, to be able to be in and out of power so many times, especially with some of the political disasters he's had and how he resurrects himself. You also write in a separate piece here, Israel is sliding towards anarchy. You show a few headlines here. Israel warns sliding towards anarchy. The purge Netanyahu completes control of almost all centers of power in Israel as the elections loom. And under the most authoritarian PM ever, Netanyahu loyalists take over at Mossad. Riots begin. And this last one here, Netanyahu should state his goal, eternal war. None of his senior security appointees would challenge him. They perhaps even more extreme than he is. What does that tell you about even the near-term future for Israel?
I just want to underline that all those quotations are not from Conflicts Forum or from me personally. These are reflections of what's been written in Israel about the political situation. So they're quotations of what people are saying there. But I'll reduce it down to the big picture, if you like, which is Netanyahu has built a machine. over 20 years, a political machine through the Likud and through everything. It's an extraordinarily powerful machine. But Netanyahu is ill. He looks ill. He looks defeated. He looks tired. And the question is, if Netanyahu goes, it's this week they're going to decide whether to have elections now or not. They may have them in September, or else they may have them in October. But the polls show that as things stand, he will lose those elections and then may have to go to jail if the court cases go against him. What happens if that machine collapses? That's the point that these Israelis are making. He's built up a machine over 20 plus years, a political machine, like the sort of machines you used to see in Chicago, a complex political machine. Then suddenly the main element to it, the cog at the center of it, suddenly disappears and the whole machine collapses. And then that could lead into internal fighting and that's why, in the quotation you read out, he's trying to put all his key lieutenants into positions to control, even if he loses the election, control the judiciary, control the structures, even if he loses the election, and perhaps even to support him if he contests the lost election. So, it could become very, very unpleasant. I can't say that it will, but there is a very good chance of that happening. But this is what Israelis are saying about it. Senior, only, respectable, people who are commentators and with experience in Israel. That's what they're saying, that it could devolve into anarchy and into infighting. And I hope that explains why, because if the machine comes apart, who's going to be the prime minister? Who's going to deal all of these? He's put all of his people into Shin Bet and to Mossad, the security and intelligence services, and other places to be able to control the country, even if he loses the election. Is that going to be accepted? Will that be contested? Will people fight it? That's questions that we don't know the answers to at this stage. But this is why it's such a fraught moment.
And so, circling back to where we began this, with the view that the long view that the Iranians are taking, when they see these kinds of things, and obviously this is open source information, this is in the public domain. Which is public. Forget about what they may know behind the scenes or with their intelligence. How does Iran seek to exploit that, and how does that factor in to their long range objectives? Well, I don't think, the Iranians are not going to be able to sort of play in the Israeli political forum. It's just not possible. It's too complex even for most Israelis to get involved. I meant, but if they see that this thing wobbling and possibly fracturing, will that inform any actions that they have to try and to succeed, or will it just be inconsequential to them? No, it is just part of the picture, which they've had for some time, and which, as I say, one component of it is that the West effectively lost the war against Iran. It failed to achieve its objectives. Strategically, it was a failure. There may have been one or two tactical, accomplishments, but overall, it was a strategic failure. The Iranians see that the West does not have the military means to take Karg Island or to take the Hormuz back. It can go on bombing, but to what end? It's been bombing for weeks without stopping the missiles, without, seriously, even the New York Times reports that most of the missile cities are working, and that, half an hour after they've been bombed, the missiles are still firing from them. So they see all this, and they see a weakened Israel. And it goes into the calculation, just goes into that calculus of what I said to you was the statement from the Supreme Leader's office, which is a very confident statement saying, we are going to dictate the terms for the future, not be dictated to
two, we are going to be an expression of autonomy and act in our interests. I don't think this is, shouldn't be portrayed as a sort of vengeance fight against Israel as such. The Iranians are not really like that. It is for them a strategic war, and the dimensions of that war go to the Gulf, and they are deeply connected with what's happening in Russia. I mean, the war in Iran has affected Russian thinking, as I indicated, and even Chinese thinking has been affected. One of the underlying things that made them willing to take this bold statement, most importantly, was the sense that before this war really began, quite a few Iranians, not a majority, but a small, significant minority, really believed that America's objective in this was to do a sort of a Venezuela, to weaken Iran and to put in a Rodriguez as the new leader of the Iran. Now, no one believes that in Iran. Everyone believes the fundamental aim of both Trump and Israel was to destroy Iran and destroy it as a state completely. And that's affected others. And that's why you have Russians too now started reconsidering. They had thought too that their attrition with the United States was essentially aimed that they'd like to return to the 90s and see Mr. Putin gone and sort of some malleable oligarchs come into his place that they could do business with and take over Russian resources in the longer terms. And now Russian opinion has swung around, and they understand that the aim all along, and has been for the last 200 years, is the complete destruction of Russia as a state.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to work out very well for us. And the attempt is probably going to end up causing real problems for us. Well, listen, this has been a fascinating show here. It's really reveals some things that you don't normally understand or that aren't discussed in this world. There's a lot bigger issues involved, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And as you see, we've talked about Conflicts Forum here in this show here. Lots of great stuff there. Definitely need to go back and take a look at that, conflictsforum.substack.com, to get more of Alastair. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we appreciate you guys to be back in about an hour. We're going to have Larry Johnson come in and all of his great sources. He's got a bunch of new information here about, what has been happening overnight, what may be coming next in this war. So he'll be looking more at the tactical situation, and he's got some great insights. You're not going to want to miss that. And then Robert Barnes, I think it's actually about 1:45 p.m. this afternoon. He's got some insight into what's going on inside the White House and how we're reaching some of these decisions. And then I think in the afternoon at 3:30, we're going to have Art Berman back, who's going to take a look at how the oil industry and the oil markets have done just heroic work to keep the flow of oil moving around in such a constrained world. But what would happen if Trump makes good on his threat to go back to hitting energy? Definitely don't want to miss that. Every one of these shows is different and gives you a different aspect of this war today. That's what you get here on Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Look forward to seeing you then. See you in about an hour. I don't try to talk you into buying gold or tell you how to run your stock portfolio, but there is a way you can help us. Subscribe, hit that like button, and share this with somebody you love.